There we go. Okay. So today's meeting is the Voyage. And what we're going to talk about is what it was actually like for those people, our ancestors, coming from Germany to the United States. And, you know, what were some of the things they had to deal with? And I've shown you this before, this book. This is not necessarily one of my ancestors. I haven't really checked to see if she's related to me or not, but this is the journals of one of the people who came from Germany in the 1830s to my county in Ohio. And so it's the same journey that a lot of people would have taken. And in this, and I know you can't really see this, but she actually drew out the maps of the places where she was, where she came from, and then, you know, where they went. So this book includes 2 sets of maps of her journey, as well as her journal of the journey itself, and then her life in Ohio afterwards. So it's a really interesting read. And what I was hoping was that some of you might have some information on your own ancestors that we can talk about after I run through this presentation.
And Mark, what was the name of that book again? Because
this is a very small production book, but it's
mine came from in the 1830s to Ohio also. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's Liwat Boke. It's Liwat.
What I want is speaker.
Boke, and it's sold by the Minster Historical Society. And let me pull up a page. I'll get you. I'll see if I can find their link. I don't want the newspapers, but I'll get to there. And let's see, find their store here, gift shop. There it is. Okay. So I'm going to post this link in our chat area.
Good.
So if you're interested in it, and this is for West Central Ohio. So Polly's area, my area, Auglaize, Mercer, Dark, Shelby County region.
Always. Oh.
So there it is, along with some other stuff that they have. Really good products there. Okay, so I don't see anybody waiting in the queue to log in, so I think we're at our 15. I'm going to share my screen, and oops, let's see.
Can't I see it?
I got to get to the right page here first. There we go. And okay. Can you all see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
So again, I'm going to start out from her village and then talk about where she went. I've got a couple of things we'll talk about before that. And I just got to figure out where to put this. Okay, there we go. So many of our ancestors made the voyage from Germany to the United States during the middle of the 19th century. But that time between the 1830s and 1860s, 1870s was a large immigrant population from Germany moving into the United States. We're going to talk about, you know, what was life like when they left? What was the voyage like? Would you have been willing to make such a major change in your life? You know, many of these people went over, they were fairly young. They were alone. They weren't necessarily with their families. You know, a husband might have went over to the United States, and 3 or 4 years later, the wife may have come with him. The wife may have been bringing the kids at that point in time. And then we'll discuss the stories that you guys have about your ancestors immigrating to the United States. So I want to start out with Le Havre, France. Now, a lot of people say, oh, Bremen. Bremen's where everything happened. There's a lot of German immigrants that immigrated from Le Havre, France. So in 1837, the French government required Germans to present a valid ticket before they could cross the border. That meant that the Germans had to have already bought their tickets for the voyage over before they could cross the border into France. And there was a reason for that, because a lot of Germans would show up at the border and try to get on a ship in France without having any money. And so, how could they have done that? Well, they indentured themselves. They signed a contract saying, I will indenture myself for the voyage. And so I'll talk about indenturing at the end, because Levat Boki wrote a letter or a large page in her journal about the indentured servants coming to the United States. Between 1854 and May of 1855, the Prussian government forbid its citizens to immigrate via France. They closed the border completely, and people could not cross across the German and French border in order to leave the country. So there were some things going on there that set up some restrictions for people leaving Germany. And so, a lot of the Germans would have gone out of Bremen as one of the ports. Instead of Le Havre, but some of my ancestors did go out of Le Havre, and this is a map of the port itself in about the mid 1800s. Now, when people got there, they had to wait for a boat. There wasn't a boat just standing there waiting for them to hop on and go to America. So they had to wait until a ship showed up, and then they could get passage. So in Le Havre, there's a little discussion here, and this says that the city is crowded with the poorest Bavarian immigrants. The floating population began to camp out on the ramparts of the east. They take shelter under the elms. Excavations in the thickness of the slope ditches serve as their homes. Those who have 2 francs a day can find accommodation among innkeepers of St. Francis and Our Lady, who specialize in taking care of immigrants. There are a dozen in 1850. Okay, so as the commissioner of the immigration noted, the high price of rent in the city of Le Havre forced the landlords to establish themselves in the narrow streets in areas that are dirty and wet. So what this is saying, there was a limited amount of actual innkeeping space. There's maybe a dozen in the 1850s that people could actually go into. So if you didn't have enough money, in this case, it was 2 francs a day, you rented yourself out space in the streets between the buildings. You could rent a corner between, or the alley between the buildings to sleep in, or you could go back to the ramparts around the city, and you could excavate the ditch bank and live in a small little cubby in the ditch bank while you're waiting for your ship to arrive. So it wasn't the best of accommodations, and in many times they waited for a couple weeks before the ship came that they were waiting to go on, because ships were not really scheduled. They didn't run on a daily schedule. You didn't know that ship X was going to show up in port on June 15th. You knew it was going to show up around June 15th, and it depended on what happened as it was going across the Atlantic Ocean. How many days prior to how many days after that might be. So I'm going to talk specifically about the track of the journey for Levat Boki. She was born in 1807 and died 1882. And this is talking about her immigration from her town of Nellinghoff to Ohio in 1835. So these are listed in days, and her journal actually has each of these days listed out. So you can see the first 35 days, she doesn't tell what day it is. So I had to go through and do some counting. And then she broke up the voyages based on the leg of the voyage. And so there's days on the ocean and days in harbor and things of that sort. So this is her leaving home. So on day 1, the first day of our journey from Nellinghoff was for me a bleak and miserable day. During the first hour, I suffered from such powerful feelings. Besides, I hurt my left foot so that I thought I would never more be able to walk. Also, it soon poured down rain the day long. The evening and night did not pass without distress from this. So, she's like, I'm leaving home. I'm leaving my family. I'm leaving all my possessions. people I know, and I'm making this journey. And to boot, I sprained my ankle. I can't walk, and it's pouring down rain. What kind of decision did I just make? So on day 5, she goes, so far we are lucky with our overnight stays and found houses with enough space and not many children, mostly inexpensive. So every night they had to find somebody that was willing to put them up. And, it was people charged the rent to be there. And sometimes you're with a group of people, and they might have, as was mentioned earlier, a family might have a dozen children, 13 children. Well, you get a couple of those together and you try to sleep in the same house with those people, with a dozen children, it can be hard to do. So you're not getting your sleep. You're on this long trek, staying over at strangers' homes, lots of children, trying to rest in between. Day 10, she says, the land has changed. We are in another region, more sand, and the weather is cold. We took the two wagon wheels or axles, smeared them with tallow, and they pulled easily again. There are no bushes or outhouses, so one must be modestly proper when urinating and so forth. The need brings the solution. So that's probably something you don't think about. When they're out there walking, there's, a mile between buildings or a mile between towns or whatever it might be. And, you have to be able to accommodate the conditions that you're in.
That's why women wore long, full skirts.
Yeah. Yes. So now we're at day 34. Okay, so this is day 34. They just reached Bremen. It took them over a month to walk from their town to Bremen to get their first, to get to a boat. So now they're in the port city of Bremen with a lot of commotion, noise, and strangers, unknown ways and customs, trade, and unknown trade structures. So one of the things is, as you crossed state boundaries in Germany, you actually had to declare all of the materials you were carrying with you and pay, what's that called?
Custom.
Yeah, you had to pay customs on the materials you were coming across the borders with. So, if you crossed 3 states in Germany, you had to pay customs at each one of those locations.
Oh my gosh.
So, the trade structures, things changed as you moved between these different states. She was in Bremen. They now have high buildings. You can see the ships, okay? So they stayed near the piers in the so-called straw house, where the sleeping beds are hard wooden benches with straw on them. One must watch out not to get lice or fleas, and washing the face and body is almost impossible here since we do not find privacy. And we must always exercise a lot of concern for our food, chests, clothing, and travel money. There are thieves here, also drunks and whores. Okay. So so that first day they got to Bremen, and then now they're looking for the ships. So they're talking to the ship's representatives, and they took space on a sailing ship for Baltimore. We learned about the costs, accommodation, decks, also about our physical safety from the sailors and other rascals. We are not familiar with the ship's routines. We were here about 15 days and obtained passage with other families, stalwart Catholic people from Borden. So they're waiting, they got to Bremen, and now they're there for 15 days. That whole time they're sleeping on wood benches, okay? And those wood benches have, straw as their seating, and that's the extent of it. I need to check something here real quick. Okay, I just got a ping, so I didn't know if that meant we had a new person waiting for to get in or not. So another problem. So the day 34, they got there, and now we're at day 49 before they can even get onto a ship. So, and this is a mistake. So because of this day 15, I've miscalculated some of these days. So now the days are going to be wrong. I tried to go back through and correct them. I guess I missed that. So they, now they've been waiting their 15 days. The next morning, the captain came and steered into, okay, so now they're on the ship and they've gone into the Weser River. They're getting ready to make their migration to the North Sea, okay? And slowly the banks of the Weser slid past and we were underway to Bremerhaven on the North Sea. About half an hour underway from Bremen, we caught an unfavorable wind, so we had to anchor. We stayed overnight, but on board there was a great deal of commotion. The sailors, the young ones, were rolling drunk and took up the harpoon. They cursed and annoyed some of the girls or women. It was fearful, God help us. So they got on the ship, they got ready to go, and they made it half an hour before they had to anchor because of the weather. So next day, today, like yesterday, the river is narrow and shallow. We are a little seasick. Our heads go round and most of our group vomited over the side of the ship. And what is funny is we're not even on the sea yet.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so you got a bunch of farmers who have never been on the water. And you know, they're now on this riverboat, and the waves on the river and the wind, you know, so they're getting sick. Yesterday we came through the port of Bremerhaven, and today we are on the North Sea on the way to Heligoland. The ship trembles and rocks and twists from side to side, and then come great waves end to end, and the stomach feels sick again, vomiting and headaches. I have not eaten. I was so sick, as were all the other travelers. So I know I took a small boat to the Bahamas for a field trip when I was in college, and we hit 10-foot, it was a 100-foot vessel, we hit 10-foot waves. I was sick for 4 days. You know, I couldn't eat anything, I couldn't do anything. We were on a dive trip, so it wasn't very, very convenient. So the second day on the sea, we must endure the howling wind and all the shaking and the noise mid-decks, the children crying. People are very much afraid and alone. We cooked once in our iron pot. It is not cool here between the ceiling and the floor. The smells, the sweat, the smoke, and the many dirty people are revolting. The men must urinate topside, and the women folk and children tween decks. The stench is dreadful, but the commotion more so. So, you know, you have to start thinking about this. You've got all these people on these decks. Well, there isn't a galley. You know, I mean, there's not really a place that serves food on the ship. Everybody prepares their own food. So they're all gathering around the small stoves that are in mid-decks and cooking their own food. Third and fourth day on the sea, we have stayed in the same place at anchor. The quiet wind billows the sails a little. So they're, you know, 2 days, they're sitting there doing nothing. They're anchored in the North Sea, waiting for the weather, waiting for the winds to start back up again so they could get moving. The fifth day on the sea, today is different. Thunderstorms with thunderclouds so dark and the wind shrieking. Our ship is thrown sideways and back and forth at the same time. Why do men want to remain sailors? Vomiting. So day 6, they're able to get underway again though. So now they're starting to sail towards between France and England. They can see England for a couple of hours. The weather's quite clear. In the afternoon, we ate for the first time, the best and no vomiting. Praise God. So this is day 6. And this is the first time they've been able to eat on the ship since day 1.
God.
The 11th day at sea, the sailors are the devil's children. Some of the men passengers are also alone, perhaps married, but they are rascals, and trouble for me and the other single girls. So she's not single, she's going to meet her husband, but she doesn't have her husband with her. Her husband's been in Ohio for a couple of years already. So these men are impudent and immodest and want to sleep with the girls. We know that well and have taken wooden pegs or something to punch them. I have a long needle ready all the time, and I will stick them in the ass or something if they provoke me too much. One girl took a little knife and cut a man on the cheek.
Oh,
Wow. I didn't even
12th
think
day
of
on the
these.
sea. Yeah, the close associations are getting to us all. Every day is detestable, with no satisfaction, and the feeling is contagious. I notice no decent conversations between passengers, and it takes a strong effort to start one with the other women. People are stingy with their laughter, never lighthearted. Every face has a wrinkled forehead, vacant eyes, and gaping mouth. We're not even out 2 weeks yet.
Oh dear.
It's amazing.
So day 13, the wind was strong all night and it strengthened enough so that most of the people again had to vomit, and so also I. In rough weather, the master of the ship ties each man so that none fall overboard into the sea. Day 14, the same, I cannot eat. Day 15, the same. Day 16, especially violent storm the whole night. It has lasted 3 days and nights. We are thankful it blew itself out without breaking the ship. Always the mighty rolling and heaving of the ships, so that everything was thrown into a heap. One cannot remain sitting or standing. No cooking throughout the 4 days, only hardtack and black bread. We finally made soup that we do every day. So on day 20, again, more bad weather, much wind, waves almost over the ship. It lasted all day and brought fear and anxiety. We did have a sort of divine service. Most of the people are churchgoers, Lutheran and Catholic, no Jews. So, and then she starts talking about some of the people that are nearby. So one man is a wood carver. He works with the carving and is long-winded. His wife brought a wooden yeast bucket with yeast in it. Imagine the smell of yeast sitting there for, we're on 20th day at sea. So the yeast has been fermenting in this bucket the whole time. She's always sleepy and yawning, and she has no teeth in her mouth. It looks ugly outside and inside. And because of that, she is tender mouth and cannot eat. She is not speechless. All day long, that mouth, which has a tongue, is waggling. She is tiresome, and her hands touch one fawningly. One could throw that little torso overboard into the sea. Then the pesterer would not be here to pester. God forgive me, please.
This girl.
The 21st day at sea, a worse than dog stole my hardtack and piece of sausage. How, I don't know. I was careless, and I don't know how it happened. I will find out. At times, everyone is on the upper deck, and one or so goat's asses stays down here alone and then snatches the clothes or food or things of others. This snitcher or snot nose will get it from me when, quiet as a mouse, I grab him by the throat or the testicles. That is my task until Baltimore. I will cut him off.
This is
Wow.
Tail off.
female relative you're talking about?
What's that?
Is this a female relative you're
Oh, yeah.
talking?
Yeah, she's 28 years old.
Oh.
Yep.
She's traveling with some other people, right?
She's traveling with some other people who she's met on the way there.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So yeah, she didn't, there wasn't a group from her town that was traveling. She got up with another group and traveled with that group, and then, got on the ship with some other people that were in Bremen. And so, these people are from a large area of Germany. Some of them don't even speak her German dialect. So she's not able to understand some of these people on the boat also.
Did you ever figure out why she left in the first place?
Yeah, her husband was already in Ohio. He arrived 2 years earlier and was setting up a homestead there. And so
Okay.
she was just going to meet him, get back with him.
Okay.
Yeah. So day 25, again, a pretty day. Day 26, a little bit of a headwind and storm. And the persons who ate a lot more yesterday and the day before, the days when it was nice, now they're regretting it because their stomachs are full and the ship is starting to roll and people are vomiting all over the place.
Oh.
So day 27, we baked fresh white bread with yeast. So they're actually getting to bake bread now. The weather's calm. They can do that. So the appetites gave new applause. The first time I put on a fancy apron since I was known as a housewife at home, just to be with Nats. So Nats, Ignatius is her husband. So just to be with Nats and again needing to use an apron. That all along is my prayer and God's answer. If it so meets his will, I am hoping for that on our arrival in Ohio greedily. So day 32, we think we are 3/4 of the way. Now remember that's day 32. So what happens here is as they're sailing, they see other vessels. And the ship's crew will hop into a skiff and they'll row over to the other vessel and say, what's the weather like? How long have you been out? What do we have to expect? And so then they come back, the ship's crew comes back to the ship and say, okay, we think we're 3/4 of the way there. The weather is fine. We're going to keep on sailing. So remember that that's day 32. So 3/4 of the way, you expect that by day 40, they'll be there, right?
Uh-oh.
Actually, well, we had something like that, you know. So the 35th day, this is day 72 of her travels now, or at least day 72. We sort of mix up a little bit, but some sailors cause senseless fuss and nonsense. It serves them no purpose. The captain's orders they must carry out. 2 sailors are confined in chains today. Then the others became fearful and obedient right away. On day 39, a woman in a family way in her last 3 months is almost ready to bring a child to birth. She found out that I had been a midwife for some years. She had false pains and was not ready. I will visit her 3 times each day to find out when her water lets down.
Oh, dear.
Day 41, the children are unruly because they see and talk with so many children. Some children are a little, some a lot more, and other children are not at all obedient, so that all the children become as they do when so many are mingled in a confined space. It's difficult for children here to eat properly. The watery soup is almost unfit for humans, and when we go to do the cooking, the swearing is not seemly. All of the food now takes on a sea-tinted flavor and smell. It's rotten. The rice and barley both are unfit. Not a few were sick to their stomachs. At nearly 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we got our noon meal because the kitchen is so small. As I said, you know, everybody's taking turns cooking their own food in the kitchen. So you never know when you're going to get your meals. Day 52. So now we are passing the streaming of the Gulf, or the Gulf Stream, a sea current which is 40 or 50 hours distant from the land. So 40 or 50 hours, that's 2 days, right? We should be there in 2 days. Great. 53rd day, a nice day again. The people are feeling better. I likewise. We are almost there. Early this morning, great fish that looked like oak trees sprayed water into the air out of their noses. Interesting and unique. You know, not too many whales in the farmlands of Germany.
No.
Day 54, various fish. Then this morning we saw land, thank God. About 12 o'clock, a pilot ship came and took us in escort to Baltimore. At 6 o'clock, there was a thunderstorm and strong winds, so the sailors had to wind in the sails and throw the anchor into the water. Okay, so day 54, they're in Baltimore. Day 57, this morning the anchor was weighed. So 3 days they're sitting there at anchor because of the storms. They can see the land, but they can't do anything. This morning the anchor was weighed and we traveled to the entrance of the port where we again had to drop anchor. And the police and a doctor came and visited. Not a single person on the ship was sick, and also none had died during the voyage, for which I do thank the grace of God. The first impression as I saw America, it is a joyful sight and lovely land. So, yeah, so the police are checking on them. There are doctors there to, you know, make sure nobody's sick. Day 58, had to stay in quarantine. The doctor came again and found everything proper. Day 59, at noon, the doctor came back again, and then we were permitted to come into port, where about 4 o'clock we were allowed to climb ashore. That pleased me extremely. My heart rejoiced. So now they're on shore. Great. You know, we're at almost day 100 now since she started walking, you know, from her town. And, you know, we're looking at 60 days at sea almost. So 2 months at sea. So the first day in America, at noon, the ship unloaded and my things were brought up on shore. There was only one inspection. And so we then brought our things to a guest house where we will stay until we resume our journey. On day 2, they hired the driver and his wagon team, and they will taking us to Wheeling, West Virginia, or Wheeling, Virginia, by the Ohio River. It cost $7 American. We had to exchange some Bremen gold thalers for American silver dollars. So the wagon, the team of horses and the wagon train was $7 for them to travel from Baltimore to Wheeling, West Virginia.
Any other room?
And then on the 3rd day, we got underway to the west from Baltimore through Elliott City, Crooksville, and Lisbon, and stayed the night in Ridgeville. I'll have to go back through it. I typed all this stuff, but I didn't proofread all of it. I corrected something, not proofread all of it. So the night stay was 75 cents with breakfast. And so that first day they traveled about 35 miles. So each day she talks about what towns they went through, how much it cost her to stay at each of the guest houses, whether they provided her food or not, no food, whether there were a lot of children in the house or not many children. There's one interesting thing coming up here a little bit, but they're on the wagon. So 12 days on the wagon. Okay, can you imagine sitting on a wagon for 12 days? Up and down, sideways, bouncing. My behind is ruined and sore. So 16th day, we have now come to the Ohio. There is a nice guest house, and we are finished with the wagoner from Baltimore. Now the last leg southwest along the Great Ohio River to Cincinnati. That is the end of this long leg. So I didn't post in here, but one of the nights she ended up with 2 other wagon groups in the same guest house. And so everybody knows that there's some issues between Lutherans and Catholics in Germany. A few things happened there. But the two wagon groups that she ends up staying in the guest house with are all Lutherans. And so they ask her if she would like to pray with them. And she sort of gives an expletive and says no. So that's what she said. So, so now they're on a flatboat traveling the Ohio River to Cincinnati. Once in Cincinnati, they got off the flatboat, and then they went by canoe northward along the unfinished Miami Erie Canal. And so since it's an unfinished canal, a lot of it is just river stretches where they haven't dug the canal yet. There are portages where they have to take the canoes out of the water, carry all of their gear that they've packed up to carry with them, and move that all with them. So she talks about a lot of that sort of travel also. And then she gets to Ohio and she meets her husband, and they set up their homestead. So a lot of that book is talking about cutting down all the forests so they could build their farm, the church that they became members of and helped build, and all sorts of other things that once they got to Ohio. But I want to talk about the indentured servants. Those people who came from Germany didn't have any money when they left, so they indentured themselves. They signed a contract. So many of the travelers came to America with no money and were indebted for the travel money. There was a trade of the German-American dealers in humans, and the dealers' men, swindlers, and informers entrapped their fellow countrymen by every manner and plausible deception. Many of those taken in were about 15 years old. No one was let off the ship except those who had paid their travel costs or had good security. The others who didn't have the funds or money found they had to stay on the ship until they were sold and were left off the ship by their sellers. No buyers bought the sick, the blind, or the elderly. The suffering and the crippled often lay on the ship for 2 or 3 weeks until they died. The chosen one is bound in writing on paper for 5 or 10 years. They cannot read English. Families are broken up and children are lost. So she has a whole thing in there about, how they need to be writing to the, the rulers of the German states, telling people, don't allow your people to come to the United States if they can't pay for their voyage. And that's part of what you saw when I said, France was not allowing people across the border without a ticket. They didn't want people to go there, become indentured, and then couldn't go, had to sign away 5 or 10 years of their life for the trip across the ocean. So that is just some of what is in her journal about the trip. You can tell she was very outspoken, and but she did write a lot of the details about things that were going on. So I hope you guys enjoyed the story.
Yeah.
And I hope it gives you a little insight of what might have been going on when your ancestors took that same voyage.
I probably would not have gone.
No.
Well, it's advance. Probably what like? Gosh.
So does anybody have any information about their ancestors and what was happening, how they did their voyage, or the names of the ships, or any of that information that you want to?
I am very old because my family came in 1727,
Right.
and they lived in the Banfield part of Germany. I have them back to 1541, the first Bible there. They're a very stable family all those years. They never moved out of the area, although they're in different parts of it, different churches. So it wasn't until 1727 they started their adventure to come to America. And it was my grandfather and his brother. They had planned to come with his father, and just before they were ready to leave, in the beginning of 1727, their father died, so they had to regroup. They saved their money. They went by river, and every bridge that they went under, they had to pay a fee. And it took them almost a year because along the way, they kept getting jobs so that they always had money.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time they made it up the river to the port, in my records, don't say which port it is. All the records say it's uncertain. Probably some of the best immigration records here are from the Pennsylvania German Society. They seem to be most complete. Only thing I have from Germany are from the church records, and it's just baptism records because they're so early. You didn't have other things going on. We're lucky that that was all documented in the same church, even though they lived in the outskirts.
Yep.
It took them a year, and they came. They all came healthy, except for my grandfather was a little bit sick. So he was the only one that did not come ashore at first. I think it said less than a month he stayed on board ship. So he couldn't have been that sick. That was good. And he started from there. Didn't live long in the Indian-American War. So many of those skirmishes that my grandmother was killed after just 20 years here. His wife did make it. Then she disappeared, and there's no records of her after he died until she's 80, and somehow she makes a reappearance and dies. That's it. So I have a feeling there must have been something that happened there with the Indians. Otherwise, there would be the church records. And they all stayed in the same area. It's not real exciting because I don't have names. I have a lot of documentation. They'll say port uncertain, a ship uncertain. So you go by what you can get. Some of those names weren't, they just didn't put them down back then.
Yeah.
I don't know who was taking records, how they were able to get everything that they got. Even tell me that much. So that's all I know.
Yeah. So there's a question here. It says, what year was this voyage? The one I was just describing was 1835.
Yeah, and mine was 1727.
Yeah.
So that's 100 years earlier. And even when they get up to the shore, they don't even name which one of the ports it is. Wherever there's a ship, that's what they take. And along the way, of course, stopping and making money, that was a big thing, but everyone stayed together and everyone made it.
Yeah. Yeah, the one I have, I don't know the month that they started with or the month that they got in.
I don't either.
She doesn't specifically say, it's February or something like that. I'm assuming, she says it gets cold as they're moving further north. So I'm assuming it's, a little earlier in the year, probably March, April, maybe, would be my guess. But no, it doesn't specifically say in the journal what year it is or what month.
I have no journal that gives those little insights.
Yeah.
All you get is the situation of the area generally for that period.
Yeah, so I'm going to post a link here. This is Saints by the Sea. This is a BYU collection. And it's specifically the collection of journals of Mormon immigrants from England and Germany and, Scandinavia coming to the United States. But a lot of them are in that same time period, and they may happen to be on the same ships. You can actually search by the ship and see if the ship is mentioned in any of those journals. So one of my families, the one that went to Le Havre, France, came on the William Tapscott. And the William Tapscott was a ship that carried a large number of Mormon immigrants into the United States from Europe. And so I was able to, when I was researching that family previously, I was able to go in and grab some of the information off of those journals to pull up information. So, even if it might not be the same ship, it gives you an idea of, some of the other conditions that might have been the same when your family might have immigrated. So that's
right. You get the general gist of what it was like.
Yeah.
They didn't actually keep journals unless someone has a family where someone happened to be a writer.
Yeah.
I have a lot more from my Welsh family from 1630 because, British. It was a totally different culture.
Yeah.
Miles, I have something about my grandfather coming from Germany, if you'd like that.
Sure.
The time?
Yes.
Okay, this was later than yours. It was 1882 that they arrived on the 30th of August at Castle Gardens in New York City. And they were on the passenger ship Habsburg, and it carried my grandfather and his future wife, who was 15 years younger than he. He was 34, and she was 15 years younger. A year later, they were married, but the ship's manifest said they were passenger numbers 185 and 186, respectively, and traveled in steerage class, compartment. Well, I guess it's either 11 or 2, I'm not sure which. Steerage class had room for 750 people.
Wow.
750 people in steerage class. But anyway, they settled in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and were married there. And the rest is history. My father was born in Lawrence, and as was my mother, whose heritage is from Leeds in England. And so I'm not too far back to the old country.
Yeah.
The thing I don't know is why they left in the first place. That would be interesting to me, is the reason for their leaving.
Now that's the time of the beginning of the industrial age. And a lot of them got that mind expansion of things they could do.
And
that happened with my Welsh, my Swedish.
Yeah, and looking at the journal that I have here, one of the pictures, and I don't think, there we go. Let's see if we can show it. So this is one of the pictures that she drew in her journal. And what this says is starving family, 1833. So in 1833 is when her husband went to the United States and settled in Ohio. And so what I'm thinking is that, there was a period of time when they were starving. And so, that was one of the reasons why he immigrated to the United States. Yeah, so she goes through and this is, let's see if I can figure it out. So that is the chapel for them.
Oh,
That's their little church, in their community, in their small farming community. That's not the church though, because this is a picture of the church, the inside of the church. That's in the larger community down the road. But yeah, she has some very detailed, drawing, you know, of the community that she lived in. This was her, you know, her little farming community, you know, area right there. Let's see. Yeah. So.
She's a good artist.
Yeah, she does. I mean, and then, you know, this is, you know, she does stuff like this also. This is Ohio. You know, so that when they did this journal, it's, you know, it's very detailed.
Very good.
So.
I wish she was my relative.
Very nice.
So,
Yeah, I know. Wouldn't that be
Why
nice to have
not?
that?
which one, this one.
Maybe she's a long lost cousin of yours, Polly.
Yeah.
That's right.
So this is them. There we go. You can I got to go up and down. So this is them portaging the canoes.
Oh, my.
You know, so yeah, it's a really, you know, detailed book with a lot of really great drawings. She does some of the covered bridges and, you know, whatever else she sees, she draws in here. And she's got pictures of otters and raccoons and bobcats and all of the animals she's never seen in Germany that she sees in Ohio. She's even got weaving patterns so that, you know, you can see how the baskets, whoops, this direction, how the baskets are
That's
weaved.
fantastic.
Wow.
So,
Great journal.
yeah.
I assume some of you also read The Pioneers, and it was kind of fun to listen as she went through Pennsylvania and down the Ohio River, which of course they deal with very much in that book. My relatives weren't part of that journey, but I found that book fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah, there's, you know, you can probably find some really good, you know, discussions of the immigration during the period of time when your ancestors came over. You can find those, you know, those period pieces that might be helpful for you to understand what was going on. Anybody else have any stories that they know of their immigrants? Yes, Polly.
My great-grandfather arrived in 1881 in New York, and it just says Port of New York. I would assume that he might have gone through Castle Garden at that point. And it was on a vessel called Batavia. And I got a picture of it that I have in my files. And port of departure was Liverpool, England, and Queenstown, Ireland. And the passenger list states the following: William Wemmer, age 19, in steerage. Ethnicity and nationality, they put down Danish. And I think they did that because he had gotten with a group of people that were all Danes, you know, from Denmark, and place of origin Denmark. So that wasn't right because I know where he came from. And his destination was the US, and he was listed with others as a laborer. So I don't know. But then I found a whole bunch of passports that he applied for later in life. That gave me a ton of information, all of which was sort of different because I haven't found his naturalization papers yet. And that gave me dates of his naturalization papers too. Yeah. So, but he came on board a steamer of the Red Star Line or a steamer of the White Star Line or just a steamer. That's what it says in all these passport applications.
Yeah. Polly, I was just going to let you know that Family Search is doing a big push on Auglaize County, Ohio records right now. They're actually going and filming a large collections of Auglaize County records currently. So,
I just found a whole bunch of land records for Charles Rout, that one person that I have a lot of questions about. I just found a ton of land records. Yay.
So you'll see some. And let everybody know that at the end of February, Family Search will announce that all of their microfilms are now digitized and available online. Not that you can see them all online, but they're all available online. You might have to go to the library or someplace. So
I'm gonna have to spend some time over with you because a lot of them are locked.
Yeah, once we open up again in the Family History Center. They're going to time that announcement with Family Search. So with Roots Tech, when Roots Tech is end of next month. Have you all registered for Roots Tech?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's free. Why not? Might as well, right?
Sure.
I'm posting the BYU Family History Libraries link there, and then that links up to those videos, and they're all free. There's no charge for those. Like I said, Dr. Meinhardt did his census records, and the one coming up soon is residential registrations in Germany, and that's on the 27th. So it'll be 7:30 in the evening for that one. And any other stories? We're coming up on an hour.
Well, I never heard really too much about the coming over from my grandparents. Both my grandmother and my grandfather came from Germany. And what I did research, he came over, he was about 18, and he arrived in New York in 1891. And so he came over on the Nordland. And maybe I could find out more about the Nordland, but that's all. It must have been a steamship at that time. He landed in New York and he stayed in New York because I always heard how he had a grocery store on Columbus Avenue, Upper West Side, New York. And my grandmother was there too. And that's where my father was born, in New York, Manhattan on Columbus Avenue. And so it went on from there. But that's kind of about all I know. And I guess my grandmother came over very young too. And all I could think, and they didn't tell me, was that you had to have a job. Somebody here had to promise that you would have work when you came over as a young immigrant. And she did. And I assume she had work in this grocery store that he had. And that's how come they met and got married, because I heard she used to work in the grocery store, made the deli things and different things. And it was a German community at that time in the area where they lived, a German settlement. So that's about all I know. They came over, and I should have asked a lot more because I grew up with those grandparents. I knew them, and I never heard too much. But we were in the middle of World War II, and people didn't really talk too much about coming from Germany at that time.
You're right.
So anyway, only thing I ever heard, and I always remember that, she left. I don't know how big her family was. She might have been one of the younger ones, but she left her younger brother behind, and she missed her younger brother. And then I heard about her younger brother. He was in World War I. He was a soldier, and he was killed on the Russian front. So I was thinking Dr. Zhivago. I could see him there marching across the field to Moscow. My uncle, my great uncle, I guess it would have been. So I don't know too much about the German part of the family, although I assume there were other brothers, so I probably, do have relatives in Germany. They must have had families and therefore they're related.
Yeah, Germany has their online military database where you can look up soldiers' names and see, what happened to them from World War I. It's available.
Well, I don't know what his first name was really. I would probably know his last name because I knew her maiden name, but I don't know what his first name was. We just call him my younger brother. I don't remember. I was a child also.
Well, I just have one little thing. I don't know about voyages. I have not gotten that far or had that information, but there's a story in the family that my great-grandparents met at Castle Garden. They were from Germany, and she was a cook and he was a bouncer there at Castle Garden. So they must have had some kind of restaurants or whatever. So that's all. That's my connection to Castle Garden. That's all I know.
Miles, Jim's 4 great-grandchildren or grandparents are all from Germany, different parts, but they lived in Erie, where we're from, Erie County and Ontario County in New York, near the Niagara Falls. And so would they have come through Castle Gardens? And I have they were from the state of Prussia, sounds like the same areas, and state of Bavaria. Would they have come that, how would they have come through? Castle is the main port there for the German?
Yeah, prior to 1892, Castle Garden would have been the primary port in New York. And then after 1892, it would have been Ellis Island, which, they closed down. There's a little gap in there. There was a little overlap in there between Castle Garden when it was closing down and when Ellis Island was opening up. If you were heading into Ohio, or Pennsylvania, Baltimore would have been one of the better ways, or St. Louis. But then there's also, the Germans that settled in Texas. And there's a enclave of Germans right in Texas, and they all came in through Galveston, generally. So, you look at where they generally, if they came in through a certain port, they probably usually settled in a certain area. And so I would think that, yours would probably be New York, Castle Garden, or
it was Western New York near Pennsylvania. They'd have to go through Pennsylvania probably to come up to New York. When you were talking about they had to have sponsors, the one lady that said they had to have sponsors, one of Jim's great-grandmothers, she brought the youngest son, and the other 5, which were daughters, came over at different times during the 1850s, like to sponsor the next one coming over, and having a job or whatever. But it just seemed funny how they settled in Erie, Pennsylvania, or Erie and Ontario counties in New York, near Niagara Falls. They wouldn't have come through Canada at all, would they?
There is some coming through Canada. I don't know how many people have any that came through Canada. Does anybody?
I do. In our family, we have quite a few, but they were all from England, not Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cheaper.
Yeah.
It was cheaper to get off in Canada than to make it all the way to New York. So some people they got off in Canada.
Oh.
Sense.
I've got a friend of mine that I was helping him do some research, and he has, one of his ancestors is Russian and one is Ukrainian. And they married, but they didn't come over together. One of them entered Canada on the east coast of Canada, and the other one entered Canada on the west coast of Canada. And they started migrating inland, and eventually in the middle of Canada, they found each other and got married.
Oh,
Oh,
that is interesting.
I love that story.
So anybody else have any other stories about the voyages on their ancestors as we're closing up to this week or this month? I do want to post next month's topic. You'll see it there in the chat. It's exploring German maps. We're going to talk about different German maps, Meyer's Gazetteer, Rumsey maps, and other sources for German historical German maps. And that's on February 11th. The same link. We got the same link for all of our meetings.
Okay.
It's nice when you post it though first, so I don't have to go digging up finding it. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
I didn't mention it, but I'm more interested in more recent German travels because my husband was born in Germany. So his family, I've had a terrible time. Well, I found the manifest where it says he was 40 pounds at 1 year old when he flew over. But I've had a terrible time getting information about his grandmother and grandfather. His grandfather was born in Nuremberg. And I tried to use the MDE, and I even was at Salt Lake City and they couldn't help me, the Family History Center. So I don't know, I'm sort of stuck right there at the grandparents.
Yeah, what time frame are you looking?
Well, he came over in 1953.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned something about the soldiers. My husband's grandfather was in the German army, went to Russia to fight. And, that would be helpful if I could look up German army records.
Yeah. I'll have to look, we might be able to do that topic later on in the year. I'm posting the link I just sent you guys right there in the chat is the link to the syllabus, just in case you forgot what we were going to talk about for the rest of the year. And that goes through April currently. So yeah, if we want to put something in there, you know, beginning in May, we can start putting stuff in there about some military records or something like that.
Okay.
I could make some comments on that because I was married to East Berliner that went through the war in Germany as a 12-year-old.
Mhm.
And when I started to research, I couldn't find anything. You have to go to West Berlin. They have all of the records that are possible from East Germany.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you guys have,
And then search for a family member. I mean, I now have cousins that I get information. I try not to ask too much, though. They don't exactly like to talk about it.
Yeah.
and if you guys
But
have,
everything there is just beautiful now. And their life is no different than ours.
yeah.
And they watch all our TV, read all our books, and have our humor.
And if you all have any topics that you want to discuss, you know, send me those topics, and we can put those on the syllabus to talk about, you know, coming up here. Like I said, I've only got through April scheduled right now, and I'm hoping that you guys have enjoyed the presentations and learned some stuff and got some resources that might help you, you know, do some of your research. But we'll just keep going after
Thank
that.
you.
Okay. Thank you.
It's been good.
Yeah.